Sometimes you just get tired from it all. Things haven't been going well and you're just plain weary. And if there's no food in the refrigerator, you get cranky. And if you're like me, it's probably best if you limit your contact with others because you also tend to be a bit testy. Jesus was that kind of tired. Tired from walking all day and unwilling to take another step further. And his disciples were beginning to get on his nerves, so he sent them off on an errand to get some food in the nearby town. And as much as Jesus needed some alone time, the Spirit had other plans for him. As he was looking for a shaded spot that might afford him some protection from the noonday sun, a woman arrived at the well to draw water, a Samaritan woman. And so a hot, tired, cranky, and thirsty Jesus, without so much as a please or how do you do, said to the woman, "Give me a drink." Sounds pretty snooty to us today, but that's how women were treated in his day, especially Samaritan women. Because Samaritans and Jews didn't get along at all. It was a feud that stretched back hundreds of years to the Babylonian exile. While Jewish inhabitants had been led off into captivity, there were some farmers and others who were left behind. And these folks, who came to be known as Samaritans, intermarried with the inhabitants of nearby Syria. So when the exiled Jews were allowed to return to their homeland, the Samaritans were ready to welcome them back. But the exiles despised the Samaritans as traitors and even rejected their assistance in rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem. From there, things only got worse. Samaritans only accepted the first 5 books of our Old Testament as sacred, rejecting their Jewish cousins' Talmud written by Jewish rabbis. Samaritans disagreed with most Jews on the idea of resurrection after death, rejecting the idea of resurrection since it wasn't mentioned in their sacred texts. The Samaritans considered the Levite priests to be the highest religious authority, and the Jews looked to the rabbis as their interpreters of the law. And Samaritans made their sacrifices and celebrated their high holy days on Mount Gerizim, while Jews considered Jerusalem to be the holy city, labeling all other sites as blasphemous. And so, although both Jews and Samaritans took pride in their common ancestors of Abraham and Sarah, which granted them both the privileges of God's chosen people, and although both groups worshiped the same God, and although both considered Moses to be the lawgiver and the prophet of God, they still seem to only focus on their differences. In fact, that seems to be a major part of the conversation between Jesus and this woman. The woman, possibly recognizing Jesus to be Judean because of his accent, is surprised he's even willing to talk to her at all. But when they do talk, they appear to be talking at each other instead of to each other, as Jesus describes living water, which the woman misunderstands to be physical water. She even highlights their differences when she questions him about the proper place to worship, Jerusalem or Mount Gerizim. It almost seems like they can't manage to get past their differences. But it's been said that fear of the other can't survive proximity. In other words, as long as these two seemingly different people could manage to be in conversation with each other, their differences might diminish enough so that they could recognize the humanity in the other person. I see that taking place when Jesus asked her about her marital status. Now, although you may have heard the woman depicted as a floozy, or even worse, because of her multiple marriages and her current marital status, there's no reason to believe that to be the case. If she had five husbands, it's very possible she was infertile. Upon discovery of the fact, her past husbands very likely would have divorced her, since producing heirs was a high priority in that day. And since it was important for a woman to have a male protector around her at every stage of her life, the man with whom she would have been living but not married to could very well have been a male cousin, uncle, or other guardian responsible for taking care of her. So when Jesus calls out her past, I don't believe it's out of a sense of condemnation or judgment. There's nothing to indicate that in the text. And there's nothing in her response to make us think that she was ashamed of her past. When Jesus asked about her past, I believe he was touching her pain. He was recognizing the suffering she must have endured to have been widowed 5 times at best, or rejected by 5 husbands at worst. He was acknowledging her despair in what must have felt like a hopeless situation. You see, fear of the other can't survive proximity. As they talked with each other, the woman was no longer a Samaritan to Jesus, but instead a human being who encountered roadblocks in life the same way he did, the same way all of us do. She was someone getting by the best way that she knew how. Today, you and I live in a culture that is just as polarized as that of Jesus and this woman. Many would say even more so. Take the issue of abortion. Those who are against abortion feel it's equivalent to the murder of a child. Those who are in favor of it feel abortion ignores the rights of women to have a say about their own bodies. So depending on what side you take, you're either a murderer or a misogynist. We've allowed ourselves to be polarized over the issues of gun rights too. One side feels guns contribute to violence, and the other side feels gun control laws infringe on their liberty and their right to protect themselves. So you're either in favor of violence or you want to take away the rights of law-abiding citizens. Immigration. One side says immigrants are taking advantage of U.S. asylum laws, even to the point of breaking the law to enter the U.S. The other side says the Bible compels us to welcome the stranger. So you're either in favor of breaking the law or you're immoral. The same polarized views exist around race, religion, sexuality, political alliance, and environmental sustainability. And we spend all our time shouting at each other instead of talking with each other. If we talked with each other, we might discover that we have enough things in common that allow us to see the humanity in each other. We might even be able to acknowledge things like fear and brokenness in each other, the way Jesus did with this morning's woman at the well. Bishop Yvette Flunder is an African-American singer and senior pastor of the City of Refuge United Church of Christ in Oakland, California. She is the presiding bishop of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, a multi-denominational coalition of over 56 churches and faith-based organizations from all around the world. Last week, I heard Bishop Flunder tell a story in which she found herself at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. The church is shared by no less than 6 Christian denominations: the Greek Orthodox, Armenian Apostolic, Roman Catholic, Coptic, Ethiopian, and Syriac Orthodox churches. So when she was there was a Coptic group singing and worshiping God, and they grabbed hold of her, probably because she looked like them, to sing with them. So they handed her the music, but since she couldn't read the language, she couldn't join in, except for the word hallelujah, because she knew that word. So every time it came to that word, she would sing out hallelujah with all the gusto she could muster. And she began to get into it, joining with them in song and worship, even jumping up and down and joining in with them in praise. And when it was time to sing hallelujah, everyone would point to her for her cue. As culturally, religiously, and linguistically different as she was from these people, they had found something that they had in common with the word hallelujah. And so the question for us this morning is, what is our shared hallelujah? What is our commonality with people who are different from us? Where can we begin to gather in a conversation that will lead us to a recognition of the humanity in each other? Folks, politicians win elections by demonizing the other side. We've even witnessed how politicians belonging to the same political party demonize others in their own party, also they can win the nomination. Polarization is necessary in order to win votes and acquire money. But it will destroy our souls if we allow it to continue within us. So this week, before blasting the person whom you see as belonging to the other side, try to find a shared hallelujah you have with that person. Look for their humanity. What are your common values? I know how hard it is to stop and do that. I don't do it enough. I'm too quick to label the other person as stupid or selfish or greedy. I'm not as willing as I ought to be to let down my guard and seek out our shared hallelujah. When the woman at the well in this morning's story was able to let down her guard enough, she recognized Jesus as Messiah. In fact, she was able to encounter the very presence of God in that moment. We have the potential of doing the same thing when we spend enough time with someone who holds a different viewpoint than ours. We may not change our opinions, but we are likely to discover the humanity in the other person. And I think that's much more important, don't you? Amen.